Hello and welcome to our series exploring what the circular economy means for leading financial institutions. My name is Emily Healy. I'm the project manager for our finance initiative at the MacArthur Foundation, and today we're delighted to have Marisa Drew from Credit Suisse joining us virtually in our studio. Marisa is the Chief Sustainability Officer and Global Head of Sustainable Strategy for Advisory and Finance at Credit Suisse. She's been at Credit Suisse since 2003 and has worked in investment banking for over 30 years, as well as serving on a number of advisory boards. Welcome, Marisa. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Great. And so I know that circular economy has been a topic of interest for you for a while now. So I wanted to kick off by asking, what led you to start exploring the circular economy?
Well, it started for me many years ago when I actually went to a talk that Ellen held, and I was struck by how simple and easy to understand the concepts were backing up the circular economy, and how it could be so profound in terms of making a difference in the health of the planet if we were to start embracing these concepts and putting them into practice. And that actually coincided with my role, which was newly appointed at the time in late 2017, where I was asked to begin this effort to look after impact investing on behalf of Credit Suisse's clients. So putting those two things together, I wanted to do a little research and try to understand in a more deep way what this all meant. And one of the things I was struck by when we started to do that analysis was that when you look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, of the 17 goals, the second to least invested from a private capital point of view was SDG 14, or life below water. And given how important the ocean is to planetary and human health, it was an eye-opener for me. And that led me down a journey to try to get into a position where we could consider using my platform and my position to help mobilize capital, both for the principles themselves, but also to invest in the health of the oceans.
That's really interesting. I didn't actually know that it was the second least invested SDG. So as an investment bank, where do you see the greatest opportunities for capturing the value of circular economy?
Well, I always think of the activities that we do in terms of the client segments for whom we serve. And at Credit Suisse, we have a very large private bank, so we're banking people as individuals. We also have a big markets business, and there we interface with the institutional investor community. So those are asset managers and others who run big pools of capital. And the final category are our corporates. And actually, the principles really touch all three of them. So when I interface oftentimes with our private clients, what I see is an enormous amount of energy, particularly coming from our next gens. So these are the children and grandchildren of our top clients. And what they are demanding as consumers is a deep understanding, in many cases, of the environmental footprint of the companies that they patronize. And if they don't like the answers that when they ask those questions, they won't buy their goods and services. And that's critically important. So if we then think about the other side of that coin, meaning the corporates, I see many of our corporates really grappling with how do they enter the sustainability journey? How do they think more deeply about the footprint that they leave? And how do they respond to these changing consumer tastes? And so on the one hand, I can match up the demands from the individual investors with the behavior of the corporates, and the circular economy plays into that very, very heavily. And then on the institutional investor side, there is more and more capital that is looking to try to make a positive environmental or social difference. This whole concept of the ESG wave of investments, where you are thinking about the impact of your investments on people and planet, is a huge topic. In fact, it's the fastest growing area of finance, bar none, including through the depth and the shocks of the crisis. And so there's something profound here for every single one of our clients. So it really runs across the whole bank.
Thank you, that's great. And it'd be great if you could also give some examples of what Credit Suisse is already doing to capture these opportunities.
Sure. So when I was first digging into the subject matter, one of the things I wanted to understand is back to this topic of the second to least invested SDG. We wanted to ask ourselves why. Why is this the case? And we conducted a survey that we call the Blue Economy Report, where we went to a very large number of institutional investors and asked them in the first instance, are you interested in investing in the blue economy, in things like the circular economy principles and so on? And if the answer to that question is yes, why haven't you invested to date? And the answer that we got back was resoundingly, people care. They wanted to direct their capital in this way, except that they didn't have many opportunities to do it. So when you look across the investment spectrum, there was a dearth of opportunities for people to get invested. So that led us down the path to say, let's try to change that equation. And we began to roll up our sleeves and really dig in to say, how can we create investment opportunities for return? And the world that I operate in is trying to create or generate with the investments a market rate of return or better. So not concessionary finance and not philanthropy, but how could we create attractive investment opportunities for our clients that were really founded in concepts like the circular economy or be directed to SDG 14 and what have you. And that led us to creating the first fund of its type, which we call the Responsible Consumer Fund. And this is where we link those principles with those desires and passions and consumer behavior, particularly of the next gen. So the Responsible Consumer Fund is founded on those very ideas that we were seeing in the consumer behavior where these next gen clients were using their consumer wallet to drive behavior. We were then linking that with the opportunity to invest behind those key themes. And one of the tenets of the Responsible Consumer Fund was circular economy, in addition to focusing on topics like sustainable fashion, electric vehicle mobility, sustainable agriculture, and so on. And when we brought that fund to our clients, it was one of the fastest subscribed for funds that we've ever put on our platform. So it really tells you that the investors care about the topic, and if you can bring the right proposition to them to help align their values with their capital, you really have something here. So that's the first of several funds that we've created. We also had an environmental impact fund, again, in part founded on the principles of the circular economy. So that's quite exciting. So this is more on the investor side and bringing investments to clients, but also on the corporate side, we are in a privileged position to be able to act for many of the new economy companies who have circular economy principles at their core. So whether it be sustainable or regenerative agriculture companies, whether it be companies that are focusing on a different type of more environmentally friendly packaging or packaging design, all of these sorts of companies were really excited to help them figure out their journey, raise capital to realize their ambitions, and hopefully create value for the investors in the meantime. So pretty exciting stuff. Yeah. Lots of places to participate.
Yeah, very exciting. So yes, it's great to hear that there's both been strong investor demand as well as interest on the corporate client side. I wonder if you could tell me a bit more about the response from clients and other stakeholders, and perhaps those that weren't aware of circular economy before this.
Sure. I think the starting point whenever you're trying to scale up a market is to try to ensure that you have a proper awareness. So awareness is the first step. So very much like what MacArthur Foundation has been doing since its inception, I think, was trying to raise awareness, but have that awareness be grounded in good data, good science, so that we don't march down a path that perhaps might be misguided or have unintended consequences. So I think we're on a very similar journey because often the understanding level of our clients is not very high on what this all means or how to do it. So we feel that there's a role to play there. And once we raise the awareness a level, then the enthusiasm, you can start to see it build. So I often say our clients begin the journey with a desire to align their investing habits with their value systems. And once they enter that journey, they go from perhaps being early experimenters, early adopters, to being converts, if not evangelical. And that seems to be the way. So it's an exciting place to be because I see the momentum happening. And while I would maybe put some of these investments that we were creating in the experimental category not too long ago, now I think we are moving from experimentation phases to scale phases. And that's when we can really move the needle, and that's a pretty exciting place to be.
Which brings me nicely on to the next question. Talking about scale, where do you see financing the circular economy going from here, both at Credit Suisse and in the industry more broadly?
I think we are on an extraordinary growth curve. If you just look as a leading indicator, the amount of money that is going into sustainable funds, I think that is very much an indicator of how much this market is desiring to scale, how much capital is looking to get invested in sustainable strategies, and the circular economy is part and parcel to that. I also think one of the underpinnings of why this will continue to scale is that I think there's broad recognition across the globe. You only have to look at, sadly, some of the phenomenon that are going on right now with the advent of wildfires in California and sea level rise and increased storm activity and what have you. We simply must mobilize hundreds of billions of capital to invest in climate change mitigation. And if I were to steal maybe a little bit the pie chart of how to get that done so that we can have a prosperous and sustainable planet, there are three main components to it. One is we have got to invest in process improvement, and that is everything from rethinking design principles to eliminating wastage and leakage in the system. The second category is technological innovation. And the third category, which is probably the hardest one, is reduction in consumption. But we need all three of those if we're going to have a fighting chance of really, really tackling climate change. And I think circular economy fits in very, very nicely with the first two, both process improvement and fostering technological innovation. And I think there's just no question in my mind that with a capital that is definitely heading this way to try to tackle one of, I would say, our most existential problems, this is only going to grow at multiple pace ahead.
Thank you, Marissa, for that really interesting discussion. I certainly enjoyed it, and I'm very interested to hear about all the ambitious plans you have for the future, and it sounds like momentum is really building. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. If you want to watch more of these sessions from our series on financing the circular economy, you can catch up on the Summit site or on our social media channels. If you want to dive into this topic in even more detail, we've recently published a paper which gives many more examples of circular economy financing in action, which you can find on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation website.